Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, hope you had a nice holiday. Good to have you back on.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street closed at new record highs on Monday as the House agreed to increase the stimulus checks to $2,000. The Dow up almost 0.7%, the S&P a little more. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, the Dow Jones climbed to about 30,000 now, rising by about 0.7%, breaking the record high. And the S&P 500 also gained about 0.9% and hit the 3,735 level. And NASDAQ added another 0.7%. It's almost close to 13,000. Clearly, the news that the President Donald Trump unexpectedly signed an economic relief bill that averted the government shutdown and extended the unemployment benefits. Now, House is expected to vote on the $2,000 direct payment, which is actually passed now, I think. So if you look at the level of the fiscal boosting measure, is clearly a very strong one. So far, it has been very much focused on monetary policy, where you are seeing M1 growth rate close to 68% and the M2 growth rate at 26%. And this is basically, we haven't seen these kind of level of the boosting measure on a monetary side. And now with the fiscal stimulus that's coming, it is also another record high level. If you look at as a percentage of GDP, you can look at that as about 20% of overall GDP on a global scale, not just the U.S. So clearly, these are quite significant number, and that is why it's fueling in the equity market rise, because people are expecting that economic recovery will be coming sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Well, in the Korean markets today, it was ex-dividend day, so a high volume, choppy session on both the KOSPI and the KOSDAQ. They were both up. Tell us about the local markets.
Yes, the local market was up quite nicely for KOSPI by about 0.4%. This is actually continued to rise from the previous session as well. And particularly for the KOSDAQ, it has risen by more than 3% because KOSDAQ has been a little bit laggard to the KOSPI in the recent a few sessions of the market. Clearly, the optimistic, thanks to the Brexit and stimulus news coming from the Europe and U.S., and also Korea's expected earnings. If you look at it, it is expected to rise by close to by about 25% plus next year, because the global economic recovery will feed into the export growth rate, and Korea's manufacturing company will be looking quite good with the earnings growth rate coming through. If so, Korea continues to remain as one of the cheaper market relative to any other market in the world, and it has a very strong manufacturing base, particularly in the semiconductor area, which is expected to grow very rapidly in year 2021.
Well, switching gears here, we see consumer sentiment in Korea has fallen, according to the latest report, for the first time in 3 months. In December, it's down more than 8 points from last month, but the outlook for home prices is at an all-time high. What do you make of these numbers, Mr. Yu?
Yes, if you look at the composite consumer sentiment index, it declined to 89.8 points in December from 97.9, so quite a bit of a drop, and it is falling for the first time in a 3-month in the past 3 months. All 6 sub-indexes declined, dragging mainly by the current domestic economic conditions and the prospective domestic economic conditions, as the COVID-19 uncertainty weighed quite heavily. Meanwhile, the future household spending is down by slightly, and future household income is down by a very slight amount. So clearly, this is the area that you are seeing some of the level that's quite decent. If you look at the overall housing prices, it is expected to rise even further from the record high that you've seen in November, and it is hitting at around 132. If you look at the property market, it seems to be at quite overvalued. If you look in terms of price-to-income ratio and price-to-rent ratios, particularly price-to-rent ratio, Korea is one of the most expensive property market in the world. So therefore, we don't expect the property prices to go up any further given the heavy regulation that you're coming to see. And if that's the case, then domestic consumption is not the area that will boost the overall economic growth, but rather it is the external factor. Particularly, we're looking at the export growth rate at two-digit growth rate in next year with the economic recovery happening in the global scale. So we need to separate these two areas, domestic consumption versus export and manufacturing side. We think that we're quite keen to be optimistic about the manufacturing and export.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.